Chapter 4 Conversations Part 2 When James was woken up at 7 in the morning by a phone call, the first thing he felt was annoyance. He was fully prepared to decline the call and go right back to sleep. That was before he noticed that it was from his mother, and that was when the guilt sank in. Shit, he mumbled, sitting upright and trying to rub the sleep out of his eyes. He answered the call. It was his mom, he had to. Plus, he hadn't been doing a good job at keeping them updated. Not from lack of trying, but he was busy, and with the time difference, it was hard to call them at a time that would work for both of them. Hey, Mom, he said, answering the phone as chipper as he could. Oh, good to know you're alive, Effie said, a certain drip of sarcasm in her voice. I know, I'm sorry. You should be. You promised me a call a day. How was I supposed to know if you were even safe? I'm fine, Mom. Promise. Yes, well, I didn't exactly know that, did I? I'm sorry, he said again. He really did feel bad. He wouldn't be where he was if it wasn't for her. Things have just been really busy and chaotic. James spent probably the next hour talking to Effie, apologizing multiple times about neglecting to talk to her and also catching her up on everything that had happened so far. He told her about the trip to the ballet, and then he had to promise to take her to one someday, since she was a little bit jealous. He told her about what it was like being on tour, trying to live out some of the less glamorous parts. Sirius's brother? Effie asked when James mentioned Regulus. Yeah, him. Oh, how's that going then? James smiled a little, not even realizing it. He's a little bit obstinate. Effie laughed. Well, he's related to Sirius, I don't doubt it. He probably would have stayed on the phone longer had he not heard somebody up and walking around. He loved talking to his mom, and it brought him to a certain clarity to everything going on that he didn't even realize he needed, to just help carry some of the stress that was weighing him down. Effie was a therapist, and she always just had a way of calming James down when he didn't even realize he needed it. James wrapped the blanket around his body as he slipped off of the bed, landing on the ground with a soft pat. The weather was warm, but the driver had turned the AC on at some point overnight, and it had turned things a bit icier. He had been expecting to see Remus, since he was usually awake first, but it wasn't him. It was Regulus making a cup of coffee in the machine that none of them had even bothered to learn how to use yet. Except he was doing it all one handed and still possessed a grace that James couldn't even fathom reaching. Stop staring, Regulus said, not turning around and still knowing that James was there. I wasn't, James said, a blatant lie since he was still staring. Regulus glanced back, a tiny raise of his eyebrows when he made eye contact with James. Yeah, okay. Make enough for two? James asked. I made enough for 5. Oh, that's so kind, James said, smiling wildly at him. It isn't, Regulus said as he found 2 mugs, one of which was clearly for James. He could pretend he was mean and grumpy all the time if he wanted, but he was still making all of them coffee and caring enough to grab an extra mug for James. How do you take your coffee? Regulus asked him as he made his own. His face was a bit pained, like he was already regretting asking. James paid attention first, watching as Regulus took it with 1 cream and 2 sugar, storing the information away for later. 3 cream, 7 sugar, James responded easily, lunging against the counter next to him. Regulus paused all of his movements and just stared at James for a moment. A look of surprise and what was probably disgust was on his face. What? 7 sugar? James nodded. He didn't think it was that many. And if he was honest, he would sometimes like closer to 9 or 10 sugars in his coffee, but even he recognized that might have been a bit too much. Regulus's eyes trailed down to James's torso, which was bare, since James never slept with a shirt on. The blanket was still loosely wrapped around his shoulders, but it wasn't doing much. You're so unfair, Regulus said quietly, turning back to dump the 3 cream and 7 sugars into one of the mugs, stirring it slowly. James didn't know what to say to that. He didn't understand what it meant either, not really. What was so unfair about him? The way Regulus said it, it seemed like a good thing, like he was jealous. God, James hoped Regulus wasn't jealous of him. He was fantastic himself. Did you figure out where we're going? James asked to change the subject. Regulus slid over the mug for James, and then mimicked his position, leaning against the counter, holding onto his mug with the only hand he was able to use. James had broken bones before, when he was a kid mostly, and once he broke his wrist after a football accident. Nope, he said simply. Good. I want it to be a surprise. Regulus raised an eyebrow, slightly amused but deciding to say nothing as he brought the mug up to his lips. James was far too long, longer than was appropriate, but he was too weak a man to look away when his lips parted around the mug, so soft and plump in the morning. He didn't look away when Regulus noticed. Not right away, but soon he turned his attention back to his mug and let the two of them fall into an easy silence. So Regulus lied. He did that sometimes. He had already looked up the upcoming tour dates for the next 2 weeks, and he knew exactly where they were heading. Miami, Florida. Why did he lie to James and say he didn't know? For that, Regulus had no answer. Well, James had said he wanted it to be a surprise, and Regulus wasn't cruel. Well, he could be. He knew how to be. For years, it was all he knew how to be. But now, it was his choice. And while he hated James, there was no need to be cruel. It didn't take long for the silence to get too wide for Regulus. Of course, James still seemed perfectly comfortable to just exist, but Regulus couldn't do that with him. He couldn't do it with many people, only Evan, really. Evan was always good at understanding when to let the silence stay unbroken, better than anybody else Regulus knew. He never felt the need to say something. He never felt like he was letting someone down by having a lack of things to say. There was Barty too, but it was different with him. Barty talked for the sake of talking all of the time, but he never really expected anything back. He never waited for Regulus to respond properly to a story or wait for his reaction. He just liked to talk without expecting anything in return. Regulus hadn't realized how much he actually missed them until that moment. He had never really had time for friends in the past, but being surrounded by Sirius and all of his friends, it made him miss his. He would never say it out loud, though. No, he'd probably send them a text about something random, and then they would just text regularly again for a while. It was easy to be friends with them most of the time. They also respected the fact that they were all busy. In fact, Regulus didn't even know what part of the world they were in at any given moment, just that they were usually together. Sirius sought him out much earlier than Regulus thought he would. He had heard the conversations last night, so he knew it would be happening eventually. He did not think it would be before noon, though, and he did not think it would be when they were still on the bus for another hour with no escape plan. If Regulus was going to talk to Sirius, he needed an escape plan. Jumping out of the bus would be his only option. Sirius shut the door behind him, although they both knew that it wouldn't do much to block the sound. Regulus looked up, waiting for him to say something stupid. I wanted you there. Oh, they were being real then. He didn't even know what to say to that, not at first. Usually they danced around the real issue for a couple of minutes, talking around the subject, but never about it. I didn't know that, Regulus said, setting on the truth. He had had a bad day yesterday, to put it simply, and he really didn't think that Sirius would want him there. Sirius nodded. Okay. Okay. You'll come to the next one? Yes. Sirius let out a huge sigh then, collapsing next to Regulus on the couch and putting an arm over his forehead as if that conversation was exhausting. Good. Now that's out of the way. Instinctively, Regulus rolled his eyes. He knew what this was. Sirius had always called it forced brotherly bonding whenever they were talking over the phone. It was where they simply were not allowed to hang up for at least 20 minutes, even if they were silent. A rule they had to intake because Regulus would just hang up whenever Sirius asked him something he didn't want to answer. I talked to Prongs. Prongs? James, Sirius clarified. Right. Regulus mumbled sarcastically. He never understood their nicknames. He refused to tell me anything. Somewhere in his head, Regulus liked that. A piece of him was basking in the fact that the two of them did keep things from each other. That James hadn't just told Sirius everything he told him. Good. So, that means there's something to tell then? Regulus shrugged. That's my job, he said nonchalantly. They can't do that, Sirius responded automatically. Regulus let it rest for a moment, to let him catch up on what exactly it was that he did for a living. It was hard to be a principal dancer when one of your limbs was going to be in a cast for the next 3 weeks. Oh, he said once he realized. It's not a big deal. My time was coming anyway. Sirius's eyebrows shot up. You were literally in your prime. Yes, and one's prime only lasts so long. Reg, serious, there's no way I'm going to be able to get a job after this. I mean, I'm losing almost a month of practice. My reputation is shot, and I won't be nearly as strong as I was. It's over. I am over it. You're over it? Regulus would love to use his escape plan now because no, he wasn't over it. Not really. He hadn't even started to deal with it yet, but he didn't need Sirius to know that. He didn't need anybody to know that. Yes, he said, lying through his teeth. Reg, just no. Talking about it won't change the fact, okay? Sirius shook his head a little bit, and selfishly, he wished Sirius was still emotionally repressed like he was, but no, he got out sooner and he got slightly better mentally, although they were both still very fucked up in the head. But Sirius actually talked about his feelings now, and Regulus thought it was disgusting. Are you taking your meds? No. Is it because. Don't, Regulus interrupted. They both knew the reason that he hadn't taken any of the pain meds the hospital had given him. It didn't need to be spoken into existence, especially with the likelihood that three strangers could just be listening in at any moment. Pain wasn't something they were supposed to treat. As kids, if they were in pain, they were doing well. Ballet was pain. That's what their parents always said anyway. The more it hurt, the better they were doing. It was hard to just switch from that, to realize that his body shouldn't be in constant pain and that there were things that could help him manage it. I have melatonin, Sirius said next. Regulus thought that maybe the bags under his eyes were worse than he thought. No thanks. It wasn't an offer. I will literally shove them down your throat. He knew Sirius would make good on that promise, so he didn't refuse. Not yet. He would probably give him a couple, and Regulus would just pretend to take them to avoid an argument. The show is tomorrow. You're coming? Sirius confirmed. I'll be there. He could sense James waiting for his reaction as soon as they stepped off the bus. And, while it wasn't one of complete shock, Regulus was still mildly impressed at what he saw. Miami was beautiful and full of life, even in the middle of the day. There were tall palm trees on the sides of city streets, and their hotel overlooked the Atlantic Ocean and a large beach. It's Miami, baby, James said loudly, shaking Regulus's shoulders for a brief moment before running after Peter to go inside the hotel. Regulus stood frozen for a moment, trying to shake off the feeling of James's hand. All right there? Remus asked, walking up next to him. Every single time Regulus saw him, the first thing he thought was how fucking tall he was. It wasn't even that Regulus was that short, 5 feet 10 and a half to be specific. But Remus? Like 7 feet tall? Regulus? How tall are you? Regulus asked, unable to stop the question from falling out of his mouth. 6 feet 3, he responded easily, not even having to lie about it. Fuck you, he said with a breathy laugh. Oh, are we fucking Mooney? Sirius asked, showing up right behind them. Regulus rolled his eyes, writing it off as his brother just being an idiot, like usual. Not together, no, Regulus responded. Remus's cheeks heated up slightly. Or separate, he mumbled. Sirius looped an arm around both of their shoulders, walking them towards the hotel. Oh, Mooney, breaking my heart. Since Regulus wasn't actually supposed to be on their tour, he ended up sharing a room with Sirius, something neither of them were too happy about. At first, they had just stood in the doorway of the room, the singular bed. They hadn't shared a bed since they were kids, back when the nightmares crept into their real life and they just needed the comfort of knowing the other one was there. Before Sirius could even move, Regulus announced that he was going to be using the bathroom first, walking right into the room and shutting the door. His body ached, and he wanted nothing more than to take a long hot shower. He was hoping that they would all be going out later, or Sirius at least, so that he could just have some time alone. Maybe if he was really and truly alone with enough space, he would be able to get some sleep. Or he could take Sirius up on the offer for the melatonin. Just before they had arrived at the hotel, Regulus texted Barty and Evan, starting their group chat back up that they hadn't properly used in months. He was hardly ever the one to text first, and he was realizing that if he wanted something, he was going to have to put in the effort. It had been much easier when they were at school, when they shared a dorm and saw each other all the time. Now, all three of them were busy, usually on different sides of the world or too busy to even check their phone. After his shower, though, he noticed that they had both responded to his text. 12:22 p.m. Regulus. I broke my wrist. 1:45 p.m. Party. LMAO. Fucking idiot. 1:49 p.m. Evan. Does it hurt? 2:08 p.m. Regulus. No, feels great actually. 2:09 p.m. Evan. This is literally the last time I decide to be nice to you. 2:09 Bati. Me too. 2:09 Bati. So, broken wrist. 2:09 Regulus. Yep. 2:09 Evan. Ballet. 2:09 Regulus. Fired. 2:09 Bati. Oh, you're joking. They can't fire you. 2:10 Evan. How did you break your wrist? 2:10 Regulus. I fell while dancing. 2:10 Bati. You're pranking us. 2:10 Regulus. I wish I was. 2:10 Evan. You don't fall though. 2:11 Regulus. First time for everything. 2:11 Bati. What are you doing then? Back home? 2:11 Regulus. Not quite. I'm in Miami. 2:12 Evan. Oh, you're definitely pranking us. 2:12 Regulus. Pranks really aren't my thing. 2:12 Bati. Reggie, you're not in Miami. Are you joking right now? 2:12 Regulus. Not joking. With my brother and his band on tour for a couple of days. 2:12 Evan. Regulus. Stop. 2:13 Regulus. What? 2:13 Evan. We're working. 2:13 Regulus. You guys are always walking. 2:14 Body. Not always. 2:14 Evan. We're working the third. We have been. We're in Miami. It took another 5 minutes of them all convincing each other they weren't joking. Regulus had no idea how they ended up being the security for his brother's tour, but he was far from complaining. Anything to make this next couple of days bearable at least. Of course, this meant his night of rest and relaxation was basically shot, since Barty insisted on them all going out that night. He didn't really have any clothes that were going out worthy, and his arm was broken, which was really putting a bit of a damper on everything he owned. Sirius had some clothes, and although he would likely murder Regulus if he found out, it was a risk he was willing to take. While he wanted nothing more than to go home, he was suddenly very glad that he was on tour with them for a while. It gave him the perfect excuse to see his friends again and to actually let loose. His party era hadn't lasted very long, just for a little while out of secondary school, when he spent the summer traipsing around the world with Barty and Evan. He thought that Sirius and his friends had all already left, so he was very surprised when the door to the hotel room opened and all four of them were standing there. Sirius himself seems to have forgotten that he was sharing a room with him because the look on his face almost matched Regulus's. This was also the first time that any of them had seen him in something other than his ballet clothes or pajamas, and they were openly staring. He had put on a black crop top that fell just above his belly button and a pair of dark washed jeans. Something simple and yet also real clothes. The jeans were a little bit loose around the waist, but not so bad that they were falling down. It had been hell trying to get them on with just his one arm. Those are my clothes, Sirius said, noticing almost immediately. Regulus looked down, pretending he hadn't even noticed. Oh, are they? Those are yours? Remus asked. He seems to have just blurted it out accidentally, looking between Regulus and Sirius like he didn't really know what to believe. Yes, Sirius said, practically pouting. Peter practically shoved himself forward, pushing past Remus and James to stand in front. His jaw dropped almost the exact moment he saw Regulus officially. Fuck me, he mumbled quietly. Sirius nudged him, but Peter didn't take it back. You are a beautiful, beautiful man. Stop hitting on my brother. I can't. Regulus fought a smile. Sorry, drummers aren't my type either. Peter sighed dramatically, throwing himself onto the bed. No blondes, no drummers. I just can't win. What is your type then? James said, speaking up for the first time. His voice seems a little bit strained, and he had to cough it to get back to normal. Sirius stepped in the middle of them. Nope, we aren't doing this. Are you going to change? He asked, turning back to Regulus. Shook his head, grabbing his phone and wallet and stuffing them in his pockets. I'm going out. Didn't have any clothes, he explained. What? Alone? Barty and Evan. Who are Barty and Evan? Your security. Regulus knew he wasn't properly explaining anything, but it was hilarious to him the way Sirius was struggling to keep up. Don't wait up, he said before slipping a room key into his pocket and leaving the room, not missing the way their eyes followed him out. He turned heads, he knew that. He had grown up in the spotlight and he was well aware of the attention he got. It was always people trying to get something from him, to use him to reach a higher status or achieve some goal. His beauty was valuable and he knew how to use it to his advantage, even if he didn't always want to. Evan and Batu were waiting in the lobby for him, lounging on one of the couches. The moment they reunited, it felt like no time has passed, and the walk to the bar was filled with easy conversation, catching up on what they have been doing, avoiding the subject of Regulus's job and Barty's family with a familiar touch of expertise. They knew when to dance around a conversation and when it was just time to outright say something. I always knew you would look good in crop tops, Barty said, feeling the need to point it out after the first round of drinks. It had been so long since Regulus had been to a bar, so he trusted Evan to order him something good. Had no idea what it was, just that it was good, and it was fruity. No, you didn't. I did too. Remember when we were shopping? But he asked, gesturing wildly as if it would help Regulus pick out exactly which shopping trip he was referring to. No, he sighed. Evan knows what I'm talking about. Evan's eyes widened slightly, humor dancing in them as he took a sip from his glass, pointedly not confirming or denying this. Regulus knew he had no idea what Barty was talking about either. My point is, you look hot. Regulus nodded, not really phased, but he was always calling everyone hot. He'd been saying it to Regulus since they were 15, and objectively not very hot. You and your slutty little waist. Evan started laughing obnoxiously, having to hold on to the back of Regulus's chair to keep himself upright. Regulus himself couldn't stop the smile out of simple disbelief. He finished the rest of his drink quickly, realizing he would have to if he wanted to even attempt to keep up with Barty or Evan that night. After two drinks, Regulus loosened up enough for a lazy smile to permanently be on his face. After four drinks, he went out to the dance floor with Evan and made out with Barty for about 10 seconds before they both couldn't stop giggling. After six drinks, they all started getting into the real drama about their lives. Barty's mom dying, Evan falling into a deep depression, Regulus losing his job, etc., etc. After nine drinks, Regulus complained about James Potter. A lot. He never wears a fucking shirt, Regulus said angrily. He was angry about it. How hard was it to wear clothes around peoples who were practically strangers? James Potter? Evan confirmed. Oh, he is so pretty, Barty said. Regulus didn't try to disagree. It was just a fact that James was pretty. Of course he was. It made hating him even harder. Can you ask him to walk around us without a shirt? No. Why not? I hate him. No, you don't, Evan said. I do. They didn't get back to the hotel until almost 4 in the morning, and they had tried to stay quiet. They honestly had. But they were properly smashed, and they were friends that hadn't seen each other in far too long. Their rooms were on the same floor, and Buddy blew Regulus a good night kiss when they stopped at his door first, walking arm in arm with Evan down to the other end of the hallway. It took a couple of tries for Regulus to get the key in, and when he finally got it in the slot, it wasn't working. Fuck, he said quietly, sliding it in and out with the same result. He had no other choice but to wake Sirius up, so he knocked, loudly. He could feel bad about it later, for now he wanted nothing more than to just crawl into bed, even if he was sharing it, and passed out until the late afternoon. He always slept best when he was drunk, and he was looking forward to hours of uninterrupted sleep. Wake up, he said loudly, pounding on the door once more. He could vaguely hear the sound of someone getting up, so he stopped hitting the door and stepped back a little bit, waiting for it to open. Regulus stopped breathing for a moment when James opened the door, rubbing his eyes uncharacteristically, not wearing a shirt. Regulus was drunk. He let himself stare. His first thought was, why was James in his room? Regulus? James asked, his head falling to the side a little as he looked at him in confusion. You're in my room. This isn't your room, he said softly, fondly. Regulus frowned. You aren't wearing a shirt, he said next. You felt the need to point it out. It was bothering him. Yeah, it's hot in the rooms. It's air conditioned? James smiled. Yeah. I tend to run hot though. The desire to reach out and touch, to find out for himself if this was true information, was simply too strong to ignore. And he couldn't even process what was happening before his hand was reaching out to feel the soft skin of James's torso. He had abs. Regulus wanted to touch them, to lick them. Even drunk, he knew that was inappropriate. James seemed to be amused, letting Regulus run his hands all over the front of his body, which he found out was indeed hot. How did that even happen? He was like a human furnace, or maybe Regulus was just always cold. Love, you're drunk, he said, carefully guiding Regulus's hands away from his body. He was cold again, and he was upset about it. Don't call me that, Regulus said, a tiny part of him trying to remind him that he was dead set on hating James. Okay, why are you in my room? Your room is across the hall, Reg, James told him. Regulus. Hmm? My name is Regulus. Oh, right. Regulus, sorry. His brain finally seemed to catch up to him, and he realized James wasn't in his room and that his room was across the hall. Good night, he said, turning on his heel and checking the room number on the key that time, not wanting to walk into the wrong one or wake up a stranger. Good night, Regulus, he heard James say. He must have waited until Regulus got into his room, because he didn't hear the door close until after Regulus had closed his. Careful not to wake Sirius when he climbed into the bed, not bothering to change his clothes.